Our first presenter today, I'll talk about abduction research for a second. One of the things that we have learned over time with abductees is that many of them start out feeling petrified with fear over their experiences, especially when they first start remembering these things. They feel like they're a victim, and it can be a very traumatic experience. However, over time, with careful examination that goes deeper than the superficial mechanics of these kind of experiences, what happens is their awareness, their understanding, and their response to these situations changes. And just like you guys graciously woke up to come in, hear our presentation this morning, they go through kind of an awakening to a deeper understanding of what's going on with them. And then their experience becomes, they realize more of like a participation, a cooperation, or, as Dolores Cannon's research has shown us, an actual direct relationship with the beings that are contacting them. So our first presenter today was living an idyllic life until 1987, when her community experienced a UFO flap that was considered one of the most active in the world at the time. No one could have ever guessed the unbelievable turn of events that would occur over the next 18 to 24 months as she was forced to accept her involvement in a phenomenon that was totally unknown to her. It was astonishing to this pragmatic and level-headed woman of 37 who faced with the undisputed evidence that she was experiencing contact with extraterrestrial beings. It almost pushed her over the edge to learn her contact had been going on for an entire life. She spent the next several years of her life trying to exonerate the experience from her mind and ignore the occasional visits, but when heavy contact started again in 2009, after several years of peace, she could no longer ignore it. Inexplicably, she found herself writing a book about the experiences as her memory opened up to the past events and the teachings these beings had imparted on her. Overcoming her fear and learning the truth of her involvement became her life goal. She now accepts the truth of these encounters and has cooperative contact on a regular basis with the beings she calls her guides. During this past year, because some of you might remember she spoke here last year, during the past year she has had experienced an initiation of sorts from which she gained a deeper realization of how humanity will move from a dual-based prison planet to a world of unconditional love. Join me in welcoming Sherry Wilde.
So I think that most of you that are here today, you already know my story, and you just got a little synopsis of it. It was 1987 when I did undergo hypnosis to investigate 2 hours of missing time. And it was at that time that my memories were opened up, and I did start to get recall of a whole lifetime of experiences. It was a frightening ordeal. It's finding out that you have a life that's a secret life and it's running parallel to what I think of as your 3D earthly life. It's a frightening hypothesis, and it's very difficult to integrate into your experience. Back at that time, I remember feeling very lost and alone. And the Center for UFO Studies, the people who were doing the investigating on my case, had a woman who was involved with them, who would have meetings at her house. Her name was Marian Anderson, and she was just the sweetest lady. She was like a grandmother. And she would have people come to her house, people who were interested in the UFO phenomena, and we would sit there and we would talk about things. And sometimes Don Schmidt, who was the co-director of the Center for UFO Studies, would come and bring us up to date on what was happening. And what I observed was that people who had sightings or had any kind of an experience would have this need to talk about what they had experienced, what they had seen, or what they had witnessed, and they would go over it and over it again. with whoever would listen to them. They would just, anybody who would listen, they would tell their story, then they'd start all over again. And I think that they were doing the same thing that I was doing, and that was they were trying to dig deep down behind what had happened to find the meaning and find the reason why this was happening. And Marion used to say, I just want to know why they are here. What do they want with us? Before I die, I just want the answer to that. Why are they here? Well, Marion passed away about 5 or 6 years ago, and I don't think she ever got her answer. And I feel bad about that. I'm hoping, I'm thinking, I want to believe she got the answer after she transitioned. But it was her that inspired me to keep digging and keep moving forward, looking for an answer as to the big question of why. Because no longer are we asking, are they here? They're here. We all know that. We don't have to even ask that anymore. Now we need to know why. What is it that they want? And I'm going to give you my opinion on that for what it's worth. 2 cents, probably. But it's my opinion. It's based on my experience with my guys. And I work with several different groups of ETs. I've had lots of different communications and encounters with them. And based on what I have been able to understand, I have come to some conclusions as to what their purpose is and what they want on planet Earth with us. So it's been since the early 1990s that I've watched the whole UFO, ET, abduction phenomenon grow and evolve. And from my perspective, there's always been 2 different camps. You've got the investigators, the nuts and bolts investigators who are really interested primarily in the ships and the hardcore, detailed. They want hard evidence. And you've got those guys who are out there looking and doing their jobs, and they never really looked too much at the abduction phenomenon, but when they were forced to, they kind of gave it a scary face. And I understand why they did that, because if you we all know the abduction story. A person gets taken from their car or their bed. A person gets taken aboard a ship. A person gets subjected to physical and emotional trauma. A person gets taken back, put in their bed. Their memory is wiped clean, and that person is labeled a victim. And so it's understandable. It's a scary, frightening thing to be a victim of alien abductions. But then there grew this other camp that started to come into formation, and that was the group of people who were actually claiming to have contact with the ETs. And our voices were hard to hear at first, and we weren't given much credence. Even though we were claiming to have contact, people were slow to listen to us. That's because we were saying that the ETs were benevolent and that they had a message. Some might even say a warning for humanity. So it was slow for us to gain ground. We were labeled as being airy-fairy. We were told that we were suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. And then we heard the ever-popular, my favorite, well, I'm sure that you believe what you are saying is true. So we were discredited a lot, which always made me scratch my head, because I'm thinking, we're the ones who are actually in contact with the inhabitants of the ship. Yes, the ships are interesting, aren't they? Nice to take pictures of and to look at and all that. And I'm not putting down the investigators. I'm just saying that the ships are interesting. I love the ships. But we're having contact with the beings who are inside the ship. You would think that we would be given a little more credence. But I think that the problem came in that, could we be trusted? Could you believe what we were saying? And because so many of us flipped over from it being scary to being a benevolent experience, that called into question our sanity.